Boss said strictly no overtime, so I left a project unfinished at 5 p.m. sharp and it cost the company a major client. Now my boss wants to fire me. So I, 28M, work as a project coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm. We'll call it Creative Corp, not the real name. My direct boss, Gary, 50M, is the project manager for our team. Gary has always been a stickler for rules, but recently he took it to a whole new level. A couple months ago, Gary instituted a strict no overtime rule. He claims it's to protect work-life balance, but everyone knows it's really about cutting costs. The rumor is that upper management was on his case about overtime expenses. Gary's solution? Absolutely no one is allowed to work a minute past 5 p.m. If you clock out at 5:01, you get written up. I wish I were exaggerating. He even scolded one of my coworkers for responding to a client email at 5:10 once. At first, I didn't mind too much. I mean, hey, I get to leave right at 5, who would complain? But the reality in our industry is that deadlines can be tight, and sometimes you need that extra hour or two to get things done. Gary didn't want to hear it. Poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part, his words, said to our whole team in one of our weekly meetings. It was pretty clear, no overtime, no exceptions. Fast forward to last week, we land a huge project with a major client. Think Fortune 500 company. Let's call them Big Deal Inc. This project is a big deal, pun intended, for Creative Corp. If we impress them, it could lead to a long-term contract and tons of revenue. The timeline is insanely tight. Essentially, we had about 2 weeks to deliver a complete marketing campaign proposal, complete with market research, branding concepts, mock-ups, the works. Normally, something like this should take 4 to 6 weeks, but Big Deal Inc. had an urgent need, and our company, in its excitement, or desperation, promised we could do it in 2. From day one, red flags were popping up. Our team of 4 was busting our asses, pardon my French, just to keep up. We were working through lunches, juggling multiple tasks at once, and it still felt like we were running in quicksand. By the start of the second week, it was obvious. There was no way we'd finish everything by the Friday 5 p.m. deadline without extra hours. Naturally, the team started talking about coming in early or staying late. We're professionals, we don't want to blow this project. A couple of us even volunteered to work a Saturday if needed, unpaid if it has to be, to make sure the deliverables were polished. But when Gary got wind of these discussions, he completely freaked. Gary called an impromptu team meeting on Monday of the second week. He looked irritated as hell, like we'd personally offended him by suggesting we might work more. Which part of no overtime is unclear, he snapped at us. I don't care how big this client is. We will not break company policy. You all need to manage your time better. If you can't get it done by Friday at 5, then I guess it won't get done. The 4 of us just stared at him. One of my coworkers, Alice, 30F, spoke up timidly. But Gary, this timeline is, well, it's really tight. We're already giving 100%. Maybe if we could have just an hour or 2 extra each day. He cut her off. No. If I let one person stay late, then everyone will think they have to. I'm not having people burning out or demanding overtime pay. Upper management wants to see overtime eliminated, got it? They're watching my department like a hawk right now. So find a way to do your jobs within the hours we have. His face was turning red as he ranted. And FYI, I've made it clear to Big Deal Inc. that our office hours are until 5 p.m., so they shouldn't expect instant responses at night. We'll deliver what we can by Friday. End of business. That's it. I could see Alice flush with frustration. My other coworker, Daniel, 26M, was clenching his jaw. I was caught between worry and disbelief. Sure, we all dislike overtime, but this was arguably an extraordinary situation. A huge client with a tight deadline. Any sane manager would authorize some overtime or bring in extra help, but not Gary. He was willing to risk the project just to follow the letter of the law, or more likely, to cover his own butt with upper management's budget goals. After that meeting, the mood was tense. We all went back to work, sharing incredulous looks. A part of me thought, maybe he's bluffing. When push comes to shove, he'll allow an exception. He has to, right? Spoiler, he wasn't. And he didn't. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We worked like mad. I'm talking sweat, stress, and frantic calls to vendors and research partners, trying to get inputs faster. Gary, for his part, spent these days breathing down our necks about working smarter. He even held up a printout of the project schedule every time he walked by, pointing at it like a rabid football coach with a playbook. By Thursday afternoon, it was clear that although we'd made a lot of progress, the campaign proposal was not going to be fully ready by Friday 5 p.m. We had most of the pieces in place, but there were gaps. Some key graphics weren't finalized, the data from our rushed survey wasn't fully analyzed, and the final presentation slides were half-baked. We needed maybe a few more hours of work, possibly working into the evening, or at least Friday night, to pull it together. So I decided to give it one more shot with Gary. Thursday at around 4 p.m., I went to his office. Well, his tiny glass-walled cubicle, but office sounds better. I gently knocked on the frame and said, "Hey Gary, got a minute?" He looked up from his computer and gave me this tight-lipped stare. I closed the door to avoid the rest of the team hearing and said, as diplomatically as possible, "I'm concerned about the Big Deal project. The team has been busting it, but realistically, we could use a few extra hours to make sure it's done right. I know you're against overtime, but maybe just this once we can make an exception? Or maybe ask for an extension from Big Deal Inc.? I don't want to see a shoddy deliverable go out." For a second, I thought he might actually consider it. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Then his eyes hardened again. "No, I gave my word to upper management. 0 overtime in my department. We're not changing that now. As for an extension, do you have any idea how it would look to Big Deal Inc. if we can't meet a 2-week deadline after we bragged we could?" "Unacceptable. We will deliver whatever we have by end of day tomorrow. And it will have to be enough." I pressed once more. "Maybe we can have some of the design team from another project pitch in?" He just shook his head. "They're all booked, and I'm not pulling anyone off other billable projects for this. Just do what you can, but remember, 5 p.m. and we're done. No excuses." At that point, I had done all I could. I nodded and left his office, feeling defeated and annoyed. Alice and Daniel looked at me hopefully as I returned to my desk. I just shook my head and muttered, "He won't budge." Alice muttered something under her breath that I won't repeat here. She normally never swears, but the situation warranted it. Friday arrives. D-Day. We're scrambling all morning to tie up whatever we can. Gary actually had the nerve to schedule a 30-minute team check-in at 2 p.m. to make sure we're on track, which, if anything, just wasted our time. I could tell he was on edge, but he maintained that smug, "I'm doing the right thing" attitude all the way. By 4:30 p.m., we are all sweating bullets. Alice is frantically touching up graphics. Daniel is finishing the last bits of copy. I'm compiling everything into the final slide deck. Our fourth team member, Joe, 31M, is pulling together the remaining data charts. We're so close to done, like 90% there, but 5 o'clock is looming. Gary pops by around 4:45. "How's it looking?" he asks. The first actual hint of nerves in his voice all week. We give non-committal answers, just about there, almost, etc. He nods and says, "All right. Remember, no overtime. Wrap it up by 5. And then he does something that still boils my blood. He locks his computer, stands up, and puts on his coat. The guy was preparing to leave. We all stared at him. Finally, Joe speaks up, sounding incredulous. Gary? You're heading out?" Gary glanced at his watch. "It's nearly 5. I have to pick up my kids from practice. You all should be leaving soon, too. Whatever isn't finished, just send what you've got." And then he left his office, gave us a curt wave like he was Mr. Rogers saying goodbye, and walked out of the building at 4:50 p.m. I shared a look with Alice, Daniel, and Joe, part shock, part fury, part resignation. We had 10 minutes left, and our boss had literally bailed. At this point, a little devil on my shoulder finally said, "Screw it." He gave an order. For months, we'd been chafing under this no overtime rule. Now he was so fanatically adhering to it that he walked out on a critical deadline. He was the boss. If he didn't care, why should we break our backs defying his precious rule? I saved the PowerPoint deck as it was, slapped a quick email together, and scheduled it to send to Big Deal Inc.'s team at exactly 5 p.m., because I sure as hell wasn't staying 1 second past. The others saw what I was doing. Without even needing to discuss it, we all just collectively stopped working at 4:55, started shutting down our computers and packing up. At 5 on the dot, we were out the door. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't extremely nervous. On the train ride home, my adrenaline was through the roof. Part of me was like, "Oh my God, we didn't finish. This is going to be a disaster." Another part of me was like, "We followed orders. If this blows up, that's on Gary." I tried to convince myself of the latter to keep from freaking out completely. That entire Friday evening, I kept checking my phone, expecting some kind of explosion. Surely at some point, Big Deal Inc. would review our deliverables and realize how incomplete they were. We had delivered maybe a 70% finished product. It was missing some key elements. Any competent client contact would notice immediately. Surprisingly, I didn't hear anything Friday night. No calls, no frantic emails, at least none that I saw. I wasn't about to check my work email after hours per orders. But I knew Monday would be interesting, to say the least. Oh boy, was it. Monday morning rolls around. I arrive at 8:30, bright and early, per usual now. The moment I walk in, I can feel the tension. People are whispering in clusters. The receptionist gives me a sympathetic look. I even see our HR manager darting into the main conference room with a stack of folders. That's when I know for sure. The shit has hit the fan, big time. I get to my desk and barely have time to set down my coffee when I see Gary beelining towards me. He looks, Well, if I thought he was red-faced before, now he looks practically purple. Before I can even say good morning, he starts in on me, loud enough that I'm sure half the floor can hear. "Why the hell did you leave at 5 on Friday?" he barks. I was taken aback. Because you told us to? Because it's policy?" I replied, trying to keep my own voice low, aware of all the eyes on us. Gary was fuming. "You knew the presentation wasn't finished. How could you just walk out? I expected you to have the professionalism to at least finish the job." Now I was getting angry too. This was rich. "Gary," I said, struggling to keep my tone civil, we all asked for your permission to stay late to get it done. You said no. You ordered us out by 5. We were following your instructions. You even left before 5 yourself." At this point, I noticed Alice and a couple others peeking over their cubicle walls. The whole office was dead quiet, listening. Gary realized this too, and he lowered his voice, stepping a bit closer in an attempt to be intimidating. "Listen," he hissed. "Upper management is chewing me out because Big Deal is pissed. They got our half-baked deliverable, and they're furious. I'm having to do major damage control. Do you understand how bad this makes us look?" I couldn't help it. Something in me snapped a little. "With all due respect, boss, I don't think it's us who looks bad here. We tried to do the work within the limits you set. Limits that you refused to adjust when we begged you. If you need someone to blame, maybe take a look in the mirror." Probably not the smartest career move, I'll admit. Gary's eyes bulged like I'd slapped him. I actually wondered if he might lunge at me across my cubicle, but at that moment, the door of the conference room, just a few feet away, opened and out walked the director of operations, Gary's boss, and the HR manager. The director, Ms. Thompson, F40s, looked at Gary and then at me and the whole floor, because by now every single person was just openly staring. She said, in this icy calm voice, "Gary, my office, now." He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but she just jerked her head toward her door. "Now," she repeated. I will never forget the look on Gary's face as he turned and followed her, tail between his legs. HR followed them in and shut the door. At this point I was shaking, from anger, adrenaline, fear, I'm not sure. Alice came over and whispered, "Holy shit." I just nodded, and then I quietly went to the break room because I needed to breathe and maybe throw up or something. The next hours were chaotic. We eventually got the scoop. Big Deal Inc. had indeed been livid about the incomplete proposal. Apparently they tried to reach out to Gary on Friday evening after reviewing it, but of course he was off the grid enjoying his weekend. By Monday morning, Big Deal's top brass were on a call with our company's top brass, basically tearing them a new one for wasting their time. Word spread that by 10 a.m. Monday, Big Deal Inc. formally announced they were terminating the contract and would take their business and their very large budget elsewhere. The big client we'd landed was gone, just like that. Cue panic mode at Creative Corp. I didn't see Gary for most of the morning. His door stayed closed. At one point, I saw Ms. Thompson exit and ask Alice, Daniel, and Joe to come with her to the conference room, presumably to ask us what the hell happened. They were in there for a while. When they came out, HR went in again. I was eventually called in as well. Walking into that conference room was like walking into the principal's office in school. Ms. Thompson was there, along with the HR manager. They asked me to sit. Ms. Thompson's tone was neutral but firm. She asked me to explain in my own words what happened with the project and the missed deliverable. I told them everything, starting from when the project timeline was set, through our repeated requests for overtime or help, Gary's refusals, his leaving early, and his directive that we also leave. I was honest about it, including the fact that, yes, we knowingly sent an incomplete deliverable, but under direct orders not to stay past 5. I even pulled out receipts. I had a copy of an email Gary sent earlier in the week, re-emphasizing the no overtime policy in context of this project. I'd forwarded it to my personal email just in case, which I mentioned. Ms. Thompson listened quietly, taking notes. HR mostly watched me with this inscrutable look. They thanked me and asked me to wait outside. By lunchtime, the news was out. Gary had been escorted off the premises. Fired. We actually saw him, red-faced and stony, carrying a cardboard box out the front doors, while a security guard trailed behind. The entire floor was silent as he left. I think no one quite knew how to react. This was the boss who just Friday was lording over us, and now he's gone. Part of me was relieved, even vindicated. His stupid policy caused this, and he paid the price. But any sense of triumph was short-lived. The fallout from losing Big Deal Inc. was just beginning, and it wasn't pretty. It became clear by end-of-day Monday that our company was in serious damage control mode. Big Deal had been poised to become our biggest client, and losing them so publicly was a hit to our reputation. There were emergency meetings among the executives, talk of tightening budgets further, and even whispers about possible layoffs because of the lost revenue. I went home Monday feeling like I had survived a hurricane, only to realize the town around me was destroyed. I also felt a gnawing guilt. Yes, I did exactly what I was told. And Gary absolutely deserved to be fired for his decisions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I could have done something more to prevent this outcome. Maybe I should have just secretly worked the extra hours unpaid to finish it. But then, what if that became expected every time? And what about the others? I couldn't have done the whole thing alone anyway. I posted this story originally in r/malicious compliance, because at the time I felt like it was the ultimate following the boss's orders to the letter story. I honestly didn't expect how much bigger the situation would get afterward. A lot of people asked for an update, and I definitely have one, just not a super happy one. To be continued, update in the comments or next post. Update 1 week later. First off, wow. I did not expect my story to blow up like it did. I'm a bit overwhelmed, in a good way, by the responses and awards. Thank you all for the support, the validation, and even the critiques. I've read literally every comment and message. A lot of you asked for an update on the aftermath, and it's been about a week since the big deal fiasco, so here's what's happened. As you know from the original post, Gary got fired on the Monday after the incident. Honestly, that entire week was surreal. The day Gary was escorted out, we were all in shock. Some people were whispering that maybe he'd just be reassigned or something, but nope, they outright terminated him. We got a terse email from upper management later that day saying, "Effective immediately, Gary, last name is no longer with the company. Interim management of his projects will be handled by Ms. Thompson." It was kind of cold and impersonal, considering he'd been with the company for years. But I can't say he didn't bring it on himself. After he left, our team, me, Alice, Daniel, and Joe, had a brief meeting with Ms. Thompson. She basically apologized that we'd been put in that position, and she actually said something like, "You all should have been allowed to do your work. What happened here was a failure of management." That felt vindicating, I guess. She assured us that we weren't in trouble. In fact, the higher-ups realized that losing Big Deal Inc.'s account had nothing to do with our competence or effort, and everything to do with Gary's mismanagement. However, just because we weren't blamed doesn't mean everything was rainbows and sunshine. The company took a serious hit losing that client. It's hard to overstate how big a deal, that project was for our future projections. Within a day or two, the news had spread through the whole company, and the vibe was downright depressing. People were worried about layoffs, and not without reason. On Wednesday, we had a company-wide meeting, over Zoom for those working remote. Our CEO addressed the situation, trying to spin it as a learning experience. But the bottom line was clear. We lost a major opportunity, and there would be belt-tightening. They didn't outright say layoffs at that point, but words like restructuring and cost savings were thrown around in that corporate speak way that makes everyone's stomach drop. Amid all this, my team was mostly in a weird limbo. We had cleared our schedules, anticipating working on Big Deal Inc. for the next several months. They had phases of projects lined up if the initial proposal was successful. Now, suddenly, we had nothing mission-critical to do. Ms. Thompson had us assisting some other teams, but it was clear that without that flagship client, our department might become overstaffed in the eyes of the bean counters. I started quietly polishing up my resume. I know that might sound premature to some, but I've been through corporate layoffs before, and it's usually last hired, first fired, or whole team's cut. And guess what? Our team had basically one big purpose, serving Big Deal Inc., and that purpose was gone. Now, let me address a few things that people asked about. Why didn't we escalate the overtime issue to someone above Gary sooner? Believe me, we thought about it. But at first, we honestly hoped he'd come around on his own. By the time it was clear he wouldn't, it was Friday afternoon and too late. Also, going over your boss's head is risky, especially in a place that preaches chain of command. We were also a bit afraid. Gary had a reputation for making life miserable for disloyal employees. Ironically, that fear kept us in line until it was too late. In hindsight, yeah, we should have raised a flag earlier. Ms. Thompson even said in our meeting, "Next time, if there's a critical issue, my door is open." But I suspect she knew why we didn't. Gary was known to be a hard ass, and not exactly open to feedback. Did Gary have some incentive for the no overtime stance? I didn't know for sure at first, but I got some insight from an unlikely place. Remember how Gary was fired on Monday? Well, on Thursday, I got a LinkedIn message from a former coworker who left Creative Corp last year. He saw my post, "Hi, I guess I'm not as anonymous as I thought," and filled me in. According to him, the higher-ups did pressure all department heads to reduce overtime, and there was even a rumor that the managers who kept overtime hours down would get better performance reviews and bonuses. In other words, Gary might have had dollar signs in his eyes, choosing to please the execs and pad his bonus, rather than bend the rules for the client. This aligns with what I know of Gary. He was always very keen on meeting metrics and making himself look good to VPs. If that's true, then his gamble backfired spectacularly. The execs would happily throw him under the bus once his, quote, cost-saving measures cost them the client. If there was a bonus, he sure as hell isn't getting it now. I also wonder if the company might face consequences for essentially encouraging a policy that hurt a client deliverable, but that's above my pay grade. Office reactions and AMP. Drama. Most co-workers have been supportive toward me and my team. A lot of them came up to us privately and said things like, "We all know it wasn't your fault," or "I can't believe he wouldn't let you stay." It felt good not to be subtly blamed by peers. However, not everyone was friendly. There's this one guy, let's call him Frank, from a different team, who was close to Gary. I think Gary hired him originally. Frank has been giving us the cold shoulder and a side of stink eye, as if we conspired to oust his buddy. At one point in the break room, I overheard him saying to another person, if they really cared about the company, they would have finished the job, policy be damned. That pissed me off, but I didn't engage. Emotions were high all around. I also got a surprise call from Gary himself on Friday evening. I didn't answer, didn't recognize the number. He called from his personal cell, which I didn't have saved, but he left a voicemail. It was bizarre. He sounded measured, like he had rehearsed it. He said something like, "I hope you're happy. You really screwed me over. I was trying to follow policy, and you all made me look like a fool. This is gonna haunt you too, you know. Don't think you're safe there." That felt almost like a threat, or at least bitter blaming. He didn't apologize or take any responsibility. He basically accused us, me and the team, of hanging him out to dry. I saved the voicemail just in case, but honestly I have no intention of responding. What would I even say? Sorry for doing exactly what you told us to do? Ugh. On the personal front, all of us on the team updated our resumes and LinkedIn statuses to open to opportunities this week. It might be pessimistic, but the writing is on the wall. On Friday, 1 week post-fiasco, Ms. Thompson informally hinted that we should keep ourselves flexible as the company figures out how to recover. That basically confirmed it. Layoffs or reassignments are coming. I don't have confirmation yet, but word is that Big Deal Inc. signing on was the reason the company was planning to hire a few new staff next quarter. Obviously, those plans are scrapped. And some contractors were quietly told their contracts might end early. It's only a matter of time before the full-time staff feels it too. For now, I'm still employed at Creative Corp, but morale is low. I haven't been officially told my job is at risk, but we're not idiots. My teammates and I have even started discreetly sharing leads with each other for jobs elsewhere, like a pact that will help each other land on our feet if it comes to that. In short, the situation sucks. Gary is gone, and still blaming everyone but himself. The company is hurting. Those of us left are in career limbo. Not exactly the triumphant ending some might have hoped for, but it's reality. A lot of you were supportive and some said I was a hero for standing up to a bad boss, but I don't feel like one. I feel like a guy who did what he was told and watched it all implode. If there's any silver lining, maybe it's that upper management got a wake-up call about inflexible policies. Though, knowing corporate life, they'll have amnesia about it by next quarter. I'll post another update if/when there's a major development, like if I get laid off or land a new gig or something big changes. Thanks again for the encouragement and for reading this far. It's been cathartic to share, even if the outcome isn't exactly a happy one. Update 2 to follow below. Update 2, 3 months later. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 months since my last update, and I wish I had better news, but as expected, things got worse before they got, well, slightly better, I guess. About 2 weeks after my first update, the other shoe dropped. The company announced a, quote, restructuring plan, and, as we all feared, there were layoffs. My entire team, except for Alice, got laid off. Yep, I was among them. They cut 20% of staff overall. In our case, they basically axed the remains of the Big Deal Inc. project team, since there was no Big Deal Inc. anymore. Alice was spared because she had some graphic design skills and got moved to another team at the last minute. But Daniel, Joe, and I were let go. Honestly, I wasn't even that angry when I got the news. By then, I had emotionally prepared myself. I'd already been interviewing elsewhere quietly, had a few bites, but nothing solid yet. The layoff meeting was pretty awkward. Some HR representative I'd never met read from a script about how this was not a reflection of my performance, yada yada, and gave me the severance details. At least I got a decent severance, 2 months' pay, which will give me a cushion while I job hunt. They also agreed not to contest unemployment filings, so that's something. Ms. Thompson, to her credit, called me personally later that day. She sounded genuinely regretful and even offered to be a reference for me. I don't blame her. I think she tried to save us, but the decision came from the very top. The post-layoff days were weird. One day I was working, kind of aimlessly, honestly, and the next I was home on a weekday scrolling through job sites. Daniel and Joe were in the same boat. We started a little group chat to share leads and just vent. It helped, a lot. Misery loves company, I guess. Now here's where things took an unexpected twist, because apparently this story wasn't done being ridiculous. About a month after the layoffs, I got a LinkedIn message from someone who works at Big Deal Inc. Let's call him Robert. Robert said he saw my involvement in the project and wanted to ask a few questions. I was a bit apprehensive. Like, was this a trap or something? But I agreed to a phone call, mostly out of curiosity and, let's be honest, a bit of boredom from unemployment. So Robert calls me, and it turns out he's a mid-level manager at Big Deal Inc. Apparently word of the fiasco spread internally there too, and he had the backstory, likely from someone at my old company, or maybe Alice, who knows. He was very professional, said something like, "I'm sorry to hear how things went down." Then he surprised me. He asked if I'd be interested in interviewing for a project manager role at Big Deal Inc.'s in-house marketing department. My jaw literally dropped. This whole time I'd been thinking Big Deal Inc. hated anyone associated with Creative Corp after we botched the project. But according to Robert, they were impressed that we tried to push to meet the deadline and that it was management, Gary, who became the roadblock. It seems Big Deal placed most of the blame on Creative Corp's leadership, not the team. In fact, they had liked the ideas we did manage to deliver. Incomplete as they were, they decided to beef up their own internal team instead of relying on an agency that might flake under pressure. And that's why they reached out to me. And I later found out to Joe and Alice as well. Daniel went to a different industry. It felt like poetic justice in a way. Gary's decision not only got him fired and got us laid off, but in a twist, it ended up potentially benefiting us individually. Of course, an interview isn't a job offer, but I'll cut to the chase. I ended up getting the job at Big Deal Inc. Joe did too. Different roles, but same department. Alice decided to stay at Creative Corp for now. Her situation is a bit different, and she's got reasons. Plus, she didn't want to jump right after surviving layoffs. Understandable. So as of last week, I'm now a project manager at Big Deal Inc., working on marketing initiatives from the client side. It's ironic, to say the least. I literally am now working for the client we lost. And get this, my new boss at Big Deal Inc. is none other than Robert, the guy who reached out to me. He's amazing. In our first meeting, he said, "We don't do that no overtime nonsense here. If you need more time to deliver quality, we'll figure it out." It felt like a breath of fresh air, though I'm still kind of traumatized about staying past 5, not gonna lie. I also found out through back channels that Creative Corp is struggling to land new clients now. Word got around in the industry about how they mishandled the Big Deal project. They lost a couple of other smaller clients who cited trust issues. Oof. I don't wish ill on my former colleagues at all. Most of them are cool people who had nothing to do with Gary's crap. But I can't exactly shed a tear for the execs who made those boneheaded decisions. Oh, and one more dose of karma. Gary, a few weeks ago, he actually sent another message, this time via email to a few of us. Alice, Daniel, Joe, and me. It was half apology, half defensive. Like, "I'm sorry things turned out this way, but I did try to do what was best for the company. I hope you all landed on your feet," etc. None of us replied. From what I hear, Gary hasn't found a new job yet. Word in our local industry circles is that his reputation took a hit, no surprise, so that's where things stand now. Not a happily ever after in the fairy tale sense, but I feel like it's a satisfying conclusion in a real-world way. I lost my job, went through some tough times, but came out in a better position with a better company, so far at least. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that toxic and absurd work policies can really wreck people's lives, but sometimes the bad outcome for a company can turn into an opportunity for those caught in the crossfire. It's a weird form of silver lining.